The shade and not so passive aggression was off the charts in this episode, and I thoroughly enjoyed it to the point where I was kind of chuckling as I watched. But it also looks like the entire cast, including newbie Diana, who we met this episode finally, understood the assignment this season to mention it all, like Bethany Frankel would say, and is going to make for a really great season, I think. Plus, later, another recap of a telling Watch What Happens Live appearance from one of the cast members. Thank you for joining me, Nick Zangle, for this recap of episode 2 of season 12 of RHOBH. Episode 1 did really well with over 25,000 impressions in only a few days on YouTube only. That's not even counting all the other platforms, including Rumble and podcasting platforms of your choice that you may be tuning in from. So thank you so much for tuning in from wherever in the world on whatever platform you are. And like always, make sure to comment along wherever you are tuning in, including the premiere live chat on YouTube or the main comment section of any platform you are on if you are a member of the replay audience. We pick up 2 days after the break-in as flowers arrive to the Kemsley's house, vetted by personal security, where PK updates Dorit on his meeting that morning with police detectives, telling him the district attorney said the full weight of LAPD is behind them in this investigation. Dorit says her meeting was 5 hours with investigators, but then somehow in the middle of the conversation, not at the beginning, Dorit starts whispering and telling PK to protect the kids and go close the bedroom door, followed by PK praising his kids for their ability to adapt without fear to this new security that all of a sudden showed up at their house and there's no questions from them, while also praising Dorit for her being what he calls the best decompartmentalizer he's ever seen. Now, I think PK meant to say the best compartmentalizer, not decompartmentalizer. I know it's just semantics, but those two words mean very different things. I know what he meant, but I needed to point that out. Dorit then explains her calm under pressure during the home invasion, which actually happened where they were sitting apparently, was due to her father's experience as a paratrooper in the Israeli army, influencing his parenting style. Now, Dorit illustrates this with a story about her father ending her fear of bees by demonstrating the power of calm and still to help shoo away the perceived threat, with the bee example of flailing arms and loud noises can make it even more mad and increase the fear factor. They end with explaining going out on the town for fun is a coping mechanism for them, where giving Lisa Rinna their blessing to continue hosting Harry Hamlin's birthday as planned was a win versus the intruder. Before this new episode aired, I actually watched the Never Before Seen episode 1. We see that they actually cut out a part of the conversation with PK and Dorit in front of the other group at Kyle's house, talking about their first time they've been robbed at their old house. And this was also brought up by former Beverly Hills friend of Dana Wilkie on her show, being a potential reason Sutton and others may not fully be believing this Kemsley home invasion robbery story. Dana also mentions the police reports allegedly do not even mention anything about a gun. And she also wondered how $1 million worth of just bags and watches could be stolen in that fitted bedsheet. I also commented under Kelly Dodd's video in response to them being on the fence about the robbery story after viewers had questioned the validity of it, supporting my stance from episode 1, which I will link you to episode 1 at the end of this second episode recap. But in that comment, I reminded everyone how PK and Dorit have been open about business issues, including lawsuits and bankruptcies, and even last season, PK at Dorit's wedding dress line launch party at their house. At the end of the night, when the men all went outside by the pool, he was very open in telling the group, including Mauricio, who is a very successful real estate agent, how he has lost billions of dollars in real estate in his past. And so I said in that comment, I don't know why someone would lie or brag about that. So that's what makes me think that the robbery is real. They just had a very unlikely string of events that led to the robbery. The robbery will continue to be woven into this episode and into the rest of the season, I am sure. Now to the continued Sutton versus Rinna feud. Starting with Lisa Rinna's lunch with Kyle Richards as the Halloween movie Kyle co-starred in debuted at #1 at the US box office. Of course, this gives us a little bit of a wayfinding timeline-wise of this being filmed in October 2021, also as the last couple parts of the last season reunion were airing for us viewers. Now, Kyle confirms she will be in the third installment of the Halloween trilogy. Meanwhile, Sutton is with Crystal trying a peach cobbler Lady M cake, which we are reminded was called the pancake cake by Sutton in La Quinta last year, where we learn it is actually a crepe cake or crepe cake, followed by the peach cobbler aspect, having Crystal do a very good job of leading us into asking about another peach on, or Georgia peach on the cast, Erika, Jayne, Girardi. Sarcastic Sutton, of course, says, "Yeah, we're really great friends. I talk to her every day, bring her coffee, a croissant, and braid her hair," in her southern accent. But speaking of Erika, Lisa back with Kyle shares more about her Erika meeting we saw part of last week, discussing things getting better between Erika and the other side of Crystal, Sutton, and Garcelle, even though their LA Times article with a headline about Erika from that interview with those three bothered her because Erika seems to think she is Sutton's only talking point, even though the article was not all about her, which we can assume now that either Erika didn't read the full article or is plain stupid to push her agenda against anyone on the cast questioning her. But this leads Kyle to ask Lisa how she is doing with Sutton, explaining she doesn't really know why Harry needed to be brought into the whole Watch What Happens Live fiasco from last week. Rinna says Harry texted Sutton to clarify they had been attending Elton John's party as his guests for many years. Stop whatever you're doing. But Sutton says she didn't know Lisa and Harry didn't know they were coming as her guest. Ending with telling Crystal her intention of going to the party without causing trouble, but wanting this silly little thing to end with an apology for even bringing it up in the first place. This whole thing seems to be Rinna continuing her pattern of being triggered anytime her husband is brought up in the slightest negative sense. And is anyone else getting flashbacks to Amsterdam, that infamous Amsterdam trip years ago when Lisa Rinna was across the table from Kyle Richards and she said, "Let's not bring up the husband. Don't you dare come after my husband." And there was glasses being thrown and Kyle had that like really weird exit from the restaurant, like wisping away or whatever it was. It was a very weird instance, but this is all building up to a very interesting Harry Hamlin birthday party where, although Lisa says she doesn't want to cause any trouble or bring this up or ruin his party, I think that's because, or she said at least that Harry isn't going to bring this up to Sutton in person. I think that's because Lisa does a fine job all on her own starting the drama and doesn't really need Harry to do that. Also, I may have to take a special trip to that grape cake Lady M place, even if it means meeting up with Kelly Dodd, who said the exact same thing as me on her recap on the Rick and Kelly show. We'll see if I take a trip down there and I'll share with you guys if I ever do. So now everyone is getting ready for Harry's birthday, where Lisa is setting up us meeting Diana Jenkins at this party to Harry, which more details on her throughout this part and later in the more formal intro. But to tease this, Lisa says in this scene, Diana's ex was a banker in London who may know of the Kemsleys, so potentially Diana could know more secrets and more skeletons that the Kemsleys are hiding, which I think would be a very interesting thing to have unfold in front of us. But Kyle is then getting ready and commenting how good Harry looks for his age, which that seems to be the understood story and comment for Harry. But Erika is then with Mikey Minden getting ready, who I actually thought for some reason they had stopped working together, but apparently not. And we fast forward to the party venue where before everyone arrives, Harry seems to not care much about the seating arrangement regarding Sutton, but Lisa seems to want to avoid Sutton drama. Still not sure if I believe her, considering she seems to be more and more thirsty for camera time as time goes on. But we did see Crystal earlier with Sutton seeming to want to squash this ASAP while not causing any trouble. So these two plans are probably going to come to a head with Rinna and Sutton in a few moments, which we will see. But on their way to dinner, Dorit explains she isn't surprised Sutton didn't come to comfort her after the robbery because they don't really have that type of relationship, and a text sufficed for that moment. Kyle is then pointing out the Sutton oddities in response to Dorit's robbery, including an Instagram post about it being Thirsty Thursday, which it was Thursday the day this news story broke that morning. Kyle then recounts her Sutton meeting at the rental we saw last week to a shocked Dorit about Sutton's "I'm sorry I didn't have a gun to my head" comment, where PK and Mauricio seem to be on their wives' side with this as well. So Erika arrives first to the party to complete team Rules for Thee, Not For Me, which is a team name we coined as Team Erika and Rinna last week in the YouTube premiere live chat. Stay tuned until the end of this recap to see who I may be adding to the team, but she enters in an obnoxious but normal for Erika way, suggesting a threesome with Harry and Lisa after she compliments him on being the oldest and wisest in the group without Tom in the picture at the moment. Garcelle then arrives next, where the sauce drama comes up again when Harry points out the spaghetti on the menu for the night. I'm starting to think this is a running, recurring joke on purpose and maybe has a double meaning for them always getting sauced at or messy at these on-camera parties. But Crystal and Sutton arrive alongside Rob, Crystal's husband, to surface-level greetings at the moment, building tensions where Sutton seems to not want to cause problems at the moment. Even a brief hi to Erika seemed welcomed by Erika, who was putting on her best sultry pose with a drink in hand persona. Garcelle and Sutton are then getting their game plan together of who they will be interacting with, since Erika and Lisa are both occupying space in group chats on either side of them before the Kemsleys and Umanskys arrive. Erika then is, with her loud, annoying voice, is like, to Kyle, and they're bonding over their same fragrance of choice. Whatever. And then we get Crystal filling in and warning Garcelle of firecracker Diana as she is walking up with her fiance Asher and a Croatian wine the size of a newborn baby from a recent trip as a gift to Harry, where Lisa Rinna confesses Diana has a very interesting accent, which is part of her mystique, which I actually think was kind of like an Ivanka Trump-esque accent, and it gives that Yolanda Hadid international flair to the show that has been missing since Yolanda left, that was not able to be genuinely filled by Dorit over the many years. Crystal boils Diana down to a comment Diana said to her of, "Crystal, you are relatable and I am not," where Sutton confesses Asher should be called Dasher because of his good looks. Not sure how Diana will be taking that when she hears that comment. But everyone sits for dinner. Erika is seated on the other side of Rinna, who is next to Diana, and is like, "Are you going to introduce me to your friend Diana, Lisa?" And I actually thought this was a little bit of a weird interaction, considering Erika and Rinna are supposed to be besties on the show. Maybe it was an oversight or there was a lot going on before they sat down. Who knows? But Erika then is suggesting she should maybe marry Diana in her confessional because of her material things that Erika seems to be very much interested in. But Erika thinks Erika Jenkins doesn't sound quite right. All this comments from Erika was more evidence supporting the opposite of what Erika said on Watch What Happens Live, which we will get to a little bit later. But then PK is explaining the robbery details to Erika and Lisa, saying this was not a Pink Panther situation. It was more of a smash and grab. I guess he's alluding to it not being planned out and that it was just kind of a random hit on their house. Not sure where he's going with that, why he has to point that out. But PK says the men missed all Dorit's expensive jewelry, including a Cartier necklace, sitting right in front of them. And he said they only got about 30 purses and all of PK's watches, which he says his most expensive one was $60,000. Followed by Erika and Lisa's reaction of like, "Oh, that's not too bad." If the edit they're showing us is correct, when they had that reaction, PK was turned away from the camera, so they could have made it look different than it was. Lisa then turns to Diana, inviting her in on the robbery conversation, where Diana entertains info that she was with Kim Kardashian in Paris during her infamous robbery, saying she left the day before the robbery because she didn't feel safe, and responded to Kim seeing her put a chair under the doorknob to prevent someone breaking in as not a war thing, more on that later, but a rich people thing, basically saying that rich people will protect their stuff by any means and they don't trust a lot of things. But we quickly turn to then Kyle pointing out all the Cartier rings Diana was wearing, proceeding to want to try them all on herself. And we learned that some of them are called Panther rings, which is very ironic. One, because, well, they're in the six-figure range, what she was wearing. But it's a funny coincidence because PK was just mentioning how the robbery was not a Pink Panther situation, and she happens to be wearing Panther rings. But anyways, Rinna then cheers to Harry's while bashing his hairstyle when they first met, which is ripe coming from Lisa, who has no business commenting on outdated hairstyles, proving once again how unself-aware Rinna is. Now, before the party goes south, I have a few thoughts. So first, what was the deal with the seating arrangement at that table? Maybe I'm just a peasant in comparison and I don't go to these fancy parties. I don't know, but it was like some couples were sitting together, as you see here. Rob and Crystal were sitting together. Some of the single people were sitting together, but then Asher and Diana were separate, and then Lisa and Harry were on complete opposite parts of the table where they wouldn't even be able to look each other in the eye. We had Mauricio across from Kyle, but then PK was next to Rinna, or next to Erika. It was just, the whole thing was weird. Cannot believe when I heard Diana bring up the Kim Kardashian robbery, because last week I mentioned in my comments the comparison between Dorit's robbery and Kim Kardashian, and if Dorit would follow suit with Kim as far as toning down her public appearance. And I didn't know at the time of filming last week's Recap and React that Diana had that close of a connection with Kim and the robbery. But I guess we didn't have to wait long for my suspicion about none of them learning their lessons from this robbery and flaunting their wealth to be proven right, I think. But anyways. All right, so dinner is over and the men go their separate ways from the girls. And we start with the girls coming together for a toast to Dorit for being there and being alive. But it quickly turns south when Sutton says, "Speaking of being grateful to be here, Lisa, I didn't mean to hurt you or Harry by bringing up what I did on Watch What Happens Live." But Lisa says, "I appreciate you being sorry, but you didn't buy a table at that event. Harry's publicist told me you canceled your table at the last minute, leaving the charity high and dry, so we, Harry and Lisa, had to scramble at the last minute to get tickets, ending up having to do a half-hour interview for IMDb to get tickets at their table." I think Lisa knows exactly what she's doing here by digging in deeper to the charity aspect of this entire story. But unfortunately, Sutton kind of set herself up for this by even continuing to entertain this story and bringing up that example related to a charity she is close with. But then Sutton, after Garcelle pointed out, brings out the literal receipt of payment for the table at the charity gala in her polite Southern charm, bless your heart kind of way. Diana seems comfortable or uncomfortable enough to point out how she thinks it is classless to discuss this type of thing and implores the girls to find a different subject as she's playing with some white powdery substance on the black tablecloth. I'm not sure what exactly it was, but they didn't blur it out, so I'm guessing it's not an illegal white powdery substance as much as the internet would love it to be. But Lisa continues to press Sutton to expose the receipts, where Kyle is like, I know Rinna has her own receipts, but after her friend Diana says it is tacky, Lisa appears to have ejected out of the pilot's seat of that plan to expose her own receipts, but doubles down on calling it embarrassing to the charity, where Sutton replies with, "Well, I also know what slander is," in her southern voice. And before Sutton and Lisa can continue discussing, Erika picks up on Sutton saying the word slander, and like a dog with a bone or a shark circling its prey, she crosses her arms and leans in, saying, "Slander, that's an interesting word. Slander, slander." And this was really creepy and weird. And to me, this actually marks Erika's official heel turn towards a villain, leaning in, pun intended, to being a villain. I figured she would do this after the reunion last year when it didn't appear she was going all the way to being remorseful and correcting course. She seemed to be just leaning fully into being infamous and playing the villain, zero fucks given Girardi. Garcelle then cuts to the chase saying, okay, show the receipt. This is your time to completely squash this. Where Garcelle reads to the group as Sutton reads to us in her confessional with her reading glasses on, because she says she's 50 now, so she has to put her glasses on, the receipt of payment taking care of Lisa and Harry's ticket. Dorit then tries to jump in to get more clarity and a final solid answer from Sutton about if she backed out last minute or not. But Lisa says this was the story she was told, where Crystal then brings Diana in saying she underwrites for this party, so she would know what happened. And Kyle confesses, oh, I see now. Diana was invited as a character witness, disguised as a friend. Where Diana adds, it is possible Sutton paid for the table but did not attend. So Diana basically sat on the fence on this one because she was clearly uncomfortable even having this conversation. She was sitting there like this with her hands in front of her mouth, and even like even Kyle and Garcelle were kind of like looking at everyone like, what's going on? But Diana confesses she's actually been a sponsor for this event for many years and actually is a good friend of Elton John and his husband. So Lisa then says she and Sutton were actually at the same table, which to me proves Lisa is lying unless Sutton shared a table with IMDb. I don't see how Sutton cancels her table and your last minute ploy for tickets happens to seat you at the same table as Sutton. Now, Lisa then confesses Sutton bringing up a receipt to one-up her at her husband's birthday after their friend was just held at gunpoint means something is off with her empathy meter. Now, I could say there is also something wrong with Lisa weaponizing both a charity storyline that wasn't actually about the charity at first, and also weaponizing her friend's robbery. We then get a quick break in tension with the men describing where handshaking came from, of using the opposite hand that you wipe your ass with than your sword hand, which these men getting along interludes are some of the most relatable moments on reality TV, because this is what happens in real life a lot of the times, is the men kind of get along and the women don't. But Kyle then jumps in trying to resolve this, where Sutton acknowledges she did step in doo-doo and owns it and is sorry. But of course, Erika has to make it about herself, asking Sutton where her apology is, where Sutton quickly says, well, you aren't getting one because I don't like you, not even making eye contact with Erika at this point, to which Erika responds, oh good, so this is a mutual thing, where Erika denies a handshake of a truce, kind of like, we both don't like each other, let's acknowledge it, but goes, you can go fuck yourself. And surprisingly, Sutton dittos that with, oh, you can go fuck yourself too, Erika, where Kyle and Dorit are like, let's not talk like that in front of all these people. But Sutton and Erika continue with a shut up war, basically one saying, shut up, no, you shut up, no, you shut up. And they somehow managed to make this Beverly Hills birthday party into a New Jersey petty but Atlanta shady moment, ending with passive aggressively mocking each other. And finally, Garcelle gets up and is like, trying to leave, and because she sees this as being very petty and nasty after Sutton tried apologizing. But Sutton then crosses into fake territory with laying it on thick about her love for Lisa, which was quickly called out by Garcelle and Kyle for being fake, followed by Erika saying she was just having fun with Sutton which I guess was on brand for no fucks given Girardi. But anyways, I have a few things to say about this. First, I love Garcelle calling out her friend Sutton the way she did to Lisa Rinna at the last reunion, as far as these over-the-top, seemingly fake apologies. But it shows to me that Garcelle is capable of holding everyone to the same standard, unlike some other people in this group. Now, I do agree with Diana about it being tacky to talk about your charitable work. The problem is, Diana then proceeded to do another tacky thing, in my opinion, of dropping all these names and showing pics of her at the charity events. To me, she isn't completely innocent on that front. But speaking of classy, I don't know why Diana wouldn't call out how classless it was for Rinna to lie with no proof, or for Rinna to take from a charity more than she gave in that instance, which was my takeaway from this entire situation. But the charity angle of this story seems out of place, but if you recall last season when the Erika stuff came out, Sutton's first reaction was how this will affect her standing on boards that she sits on, including many charities. But I think exposing Rinna's lifestyle was just an added bonus of Sutton bringing this up than she initially intended, which has me amending my comments from last week about it not being about the charity itself. But I do think Rinna did this to herself. If she would have just taken the apology from Sutton, she would not have needed to expose how she ended up getting tickets from IMDb. And I think wouldn't have added any more scratches to her record as opposed to Sutton, who would have come out the most damaged out of this. But now she's probably coming out either not damaged or less damaged than Rinna. But fun fact about IMDb TV, which I believe is what Rinna was referring to, that was actually bought by Amazon recently and recently rebranded to Amazon Freevee or Freevee, which happens to be the home for a former Bravo celebrity Jeff Lewis's new show. Before we get into the last couple scenes of this episode, as a reminder, if you have not done so already, make sure to thumbs up this episode on YouTube in this video, give it a rumble on Rumble, or rate this on whichever podcasting platform you are tuning in from. So we then get the formal intro of Diana Jenkins at her Beverly Hills home, one of her many homes, including a Hidden Hills estate, which is not in Beverly Hills, mind you. She has a 22-year-old son, 19-year-old daughter, and a toddler with her 33-year-old fiance, Asher, who we just met at the party. She says she is 15 years older and lets us do the math. Luckily, I don't think I need my engineering degree to do this math. This means she is 48 years old and carried her baby at 47, which adds up with what Lisa Rinna said earlier. She also has her multi-person staff and high-maintenance dog, Pearl. She explains, although she sounds pretentious, half her life she grew up a poor tomboy that beat the shit out of a gang leader messing with her brother. And at 19, her dad got her out of her home country to move to London without a penny to her name, working to earn anything she could. But after 10 years of just trying to survive, she met her ex, who was a top investment banker in the world, catapulting her to extreme wealth, but divorced because she wasn't happy and wanted her own identity. This also was where my engineering degree actually came into the most handy, which was understanding her accent, because I had mostly international accented professors in school. So I have a few questions after this formal Diana meeting. First, Diana said she met her fiance at a Victoria's Secret fashion show. So I wonder what that was all about, because he said he was a musician and she, I guess, is in fashion maybe. I don't know. America must not be as bad as some people want to make it out to be as of late. If we are a place where people like Diana, who are escaping poverty and war and humanitarian crises and mistreatment elsewhere in the world, are coming as their final stop to seek peace. Not saying we are a perfect country, but also I wonder, though, if Diana's connections to other infamous, powerful players in the world will come up, or just be left to the blogs and internet sleuths to discover and discuss. At the end of this video, make sure to go to the description on YouTube for the first video in your start of a rabbit hole down Diana's past and her connections. We end the episode with Kyle meeting Sutton at her store, Sutton, starting out surface level about the fashions on display, followed by an invite to an event at the store coming up for the designer, subject of the fire Sutton was putting out last episode of getting them to the States amid customs challenges due to events in the world. Kyle seems taken aback by Sutton trying to sell her stuff right away, but either Sutton is good at her job and Kyle can take some tips, considering she has had a failed store in Beverly Hills closed down, just saying, or Sutton maybe is desperate to keep her doors open. Who knows? But they sit down to chat about just that, and Kyle throws some subtle shade at Sutton for repeating the Paris theme of the party, where Sutton educates Kyle and me on what a Francophile is, which is a lover of France, and I had to look it up, and it's named after their former currency of a franc before they switched to the euro. But Kyle then goes right into asking Sutton about the post-robbery meeting, because it has been bothering Kyle so much about how Sutton reacted. instead of spending energy on comforting her friend Dorit. But Sutton clarifies it happened to occur on a busy day and alluded to the story having a high risk of triggering her, citing a robbery at a young age in her life and her father dying of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, where Kyle ends by saying she is more freaked out by this doubling down of Sutton and says, "How can you be so insensitive making this about you?" I think Sutton continues to be misunderstood. Not sure if it's because she isn't communicating clearly or she is really just the smartest out of the group and these other girls just don't get her, or they're all just playing dumb because they disagree with her and are trying to get her to change her mind by making her feel like she's crazy. And also Kyle here seems to be upset about Sutton's lack of empathy for Dorit, but in the same conversation isn't empathizing with Sutton, sharing about her past trauma from a robbery and parents' death. Another example of these ladies not being very self-aware. And maybe Kyle is the next member of team Rules for Thee, not for me, as I mentioned earlier. But also, why is Sutton being held to fire for lack of empathy, but not as much for Erika regarding the victims? Is it because Sutton is a little softer in her delivery versus Erika, so people feel like they can push her around more? They take it as weakness. Also, I thought it was interesting that they were having this conversation, and Sutton brought up her dad's how he died at her store, which is where I think her mom visited her last season or the season before, talking about this same thing. But maybe the scene earlier with Sutton not backing down to Erika was a turning point for her. Just because Sutton isn't crying and showing emotions like you did, Kyle, doesn't mean she isn't feeling things on the inside. Not only are the cast members missing the point of Sutton's explanation of why she reacted the way she did, but also Kelly and Rick did too in their recap. But let me know if you understood it like I did, or you do now that I've kind of explained my perspective, or let me know if you think I'm completely off base here. All right, now to Erika Jayne Girardi's very telling Watch What Happens Live appearance. So I thought Erika actually looked really great on the show, but Erika had this contradicting reason for making up with PK and Mauricio quicker than Sutton, a different reason than Kyle gave last week on Watch What Happens Live. Erika said knowing and seeing Sutton more than the men was her reason for not making up as fast, versus Kyle saying she knew PK and Mauricio longer as the reason she made up with them faster. Now, she also says she picks up Tom's phone calls now, even though last season that piece of information brought to light by Garcelle and La Quinta was a trigger for her. This to me makes me think she does think she's out of the water completely, because why would she say that now if before that was a huge deal to her? Also, I don't know if I believe Erika saying on Watch What Happens Live she is not looking for a man with money, considering her tagline says she has nothing to lose, meaning she has nothing, coupled with her reaction to Diana this episode. Erika's comments to Bethany saying, "Oh, my man's in home and your man is dead," after Andy questioned her what she thought about the rumors Bethany had shared with Andy about things going on with Tom years ago. I didn't think those comments were meant to be shady. I just think it was Erika's typical zero fucks given delivery, which often comes off as harsh and mean and nasty, even if her intent wasn't exactly that. I think Erika at this point is becoming the personification of it's not what you say, it's how you say it, with Sutton being on the other end of the spectrum for that saying. But at the very least, this whole thing should be a lesson for all of us to not be like Erika in our real lives. To me, this also proved Garcelle's point from last week that Erika may be jumping the gun on legal issues and may be a case that we're seeing of someone resting on their laurels or some sort of high horse complacency, which I've also seen happen in this space with other bloggers and podcasters and YouTubers who cover similar topics that I do, and also something I've been personally dealing with in my career offline recently, of kind of a what got me here is not going to get me there. Erika also said, seriously, the criticism needs to stop, and then laughs, oh, maybe not, because I think she secretly likes all the attention. She doesn't really care if it's bad attention. Same thing on the show when she says she's happy other people are getting the spotlight and the attention's on them, but then has to make everything about her still. So I don't think she dislikes the attention at this point. But we are doing her a favor by keeping her name in our mouths But don't be surprised, Erika, if what you put out there comes right back to you, including you wondering why some people have not reached out to you. Apparently, you have not watched last season when you snapped and threatened anyone who dared question any aspect of your legal and personal issues. Maybe it is time, Erika, to look inward and take some responsibility or show some remorse without someone like Andy, who's in charge of your livelihood and paycheck, forcing it out of you like holding down a kid, pulling teeth out of their mouth. But also, if your tagline is true and you have nothing to hide or lose, then what does it cost you to just be sympathetic, empathetic to the victims? I personally don't lose sleep over Erika. If anything, I'm losing sleep knowing a licensing board in the state I reside in, where I am pursuing a license through a different licensing board than the one Tom was a part of, has had such a long history of negligence and corruption. That is the reason I started and continue to cover this franchise of Housewives in particular for a second year in a row ever since the Erika stuff blew up. But now to a quick recap and react of Bravo Housewives adjacent guest alongside Erika, Christine Quinn from Selling Sunset on Netflix. Now, why was she on Watch What Happens Live, a Bravo show where a rival show, Million Dollar Listing, airs against Netflix Selling Sunset? Besides promoting her book, which is an outside project from those shows, I do think there was a mutual benefit because they all get publicity and can further progress storylines on their respective shows and get eyeballs on all the shows. But also Bravo having Christine on, even if talking about a rival show, to me seems to give more credibility to Bravo's Million Dollar Listing franchise because that franchise had been around almost 10 years before Selling Sunset ever came around on Netflix. Plus, Netflix is under fire recently for subscription declines, layoffs, and fresh misconduct allegations from Christine herself against the Selling Sunset creator, Adam DeVello of MTV The Hills fame. Now, Christine also threw some shade when Andy was grilling her on not showing up to her reunion, calling Netflix Blockbuster, alluding to, I think, the subscriber dip and impending decline of the streaming giant, like Blockbuster's fate, ironically, as a result largely of Netflix's popularity at that time. But also Christine's comment about her co-star Garcelle Stoss's nails being a reason that maybe Garcelle's relationship with a person with female anatomy, who I guess identifies as non-binary, to me is referencing the fact that you might not be sticking your fingers up another person, if you will, or in another person if you have those long fingernails. That's what I thought she was alluding to. But also her saying she was watching the Kardashians on Hulu rather than the reunion on Netflix for her own show, to me indicates Christine is open to looking at any interested parties offering her any deal on TV because she keeps name checking all these rivals to potentially either also aid in her Netflix negotiations. But she's been very clear that she does not want to leave TV and she is happy being on TV. Also, her Watch What Happens Live appearance could land her a spot on Million Dollar Listing. Finally, on the ratings front, for all of you fellow data nerds like myself out there, in the United States, 940,000 people watched episode 2 this week live versus 1.15 million for the premiere episode 1 last week. It is still up from the 900,000 from episode 2 last season, but a bigger drop off than last season from episode 1 to episode 2. Now, historically, it looks like a drop from episode 1 to 2 is normal with a rebound throughout the season as it continues on. Overall, though, still good, showing growth from season to season. I want to thank you for joining me for this episode 2 recap and react. I hope you join me for the next one. Make sure to click around the channel for more. Thank you so much for having me in your online life, and I will talk to you in the next one.